Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show with SportsbookReview.com. I'm your host, Lee Martin, here to break down the entire main card for this weekend's fight night in UFC Vegas 31, Islam Makhachev versus Thiago Moises. Again, this Saturday, July 17th, it will be at the UFC Apex. And joining me this week, we have back together again the Dream Team. We have SBR's UFC expert David Manyun and MMA Mania's lead host Matt Ryan. Now, before we get into all the good juicy stuff, like always, real quick, give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. Now, let's begin the show. Like always, I want to begin with a recap of the events that happened over the weekend, and that was UFC 264, Poirier versus McGregor 3, and what an event. I'm sorry. The one thing that stood out to me the most, Sean O'Malley versus Chris Moutinho. Chris Moutinho, I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan. The fact that he kept eating everything that Sean O'Malley had to throw at him, even Sean O'Malley was like, what the heck? But then besides that, of course, the main event in Poirier versus McGregor, and I thought it was quite comical because McGregor said that Poirier would be leaving in a coffin or a stretcher, and then McGregor ended up leaving on a stretcher. So there's that. But with that aside, I want to hear how your bets and your picks went over the weekend. Matt, since you weren't with us last week, I want to begin with you and hear how your weekend went.
It's a very good thing I wasn't here last week because then I wouldn't have had to give that fight as much thought as I did. Sean O'Malley, that fight. Sean O'Malley beat that man's face until it resembled beautiful Squidward, and somehow he was able to make it through most of the fight. Mm-hmm. That entire card was bananas, and I am so glad that I was able to watch it. But let's just admit it: the McGregor-Poirier fight was not what anybody wanted. No. It wasn't. It was as soothing a fight as oatmeal is. Like you got to eat something, but that's not what you want to eat. It's a full and balanced breakfast, but it's not. It wasn't satisfying to see that happen. We all now know there's going to be a fourth fight. We really wish there was actually a decision in that fight and not McGregor being taken out on a stretcher because of things that were not necessarily because of Dustin Poirier. So it necessitates that fourth fight. I really wish we had that settled on Saturday, but here we are again.
Honestly, McGregor let his nerves get the best of him, and honestly, for the fourth, if there is a fourth, hopefully he gathers himself together. But Dave, I want to hear how your picks went, how your punching parlays were, how your precise picks were. Let me know how your Saturday went.
Yeah, what an incredible event. I think, I genuinely believe that when Conor McGregor is on a card, majority of fighters realize that all eyes are going to be on them, and they really do pull it out of the bag straight from the get-go. Zhao Magulov with a finish, which I did not expect. Submission in round one. He got Jerome Rivera out of there quick. Brad Tavares and Akhmedov, they put on an incredible display straight into the Fight Pass prelims. We went to, Driscus Duplessis. He finished Trevin Giles, something else I didn't expect. I thought that was going to go to the scorecards. Ilia Topuria with the finish, round one, got work done quick. As we said last week, that ring rust, it can play its part, and it did against Ryan Hall. And then obviously the main card, the predictions were going great, actually. I was 6-1. I think 6-1 heading into the main card, and then it went downhill when Irene Aldana got the knockout, and then Gilbert Burns. The wrestling worked. I didn't think he was going to be able to utilize that grappling as much as he did against Wonderboy, but he sure as hell did. And then I'm not sure how many more leg breaks I can take within such a short period of time, but Conor McGregor snapping his leg, that is not good for him personally as a fighter. I'm not sure with them type. I know Anderson Silva came back and he didn't look awful, but fighters with them type of injuries, just mentally, that is going to play into their mind heading into any fight. So for him to be screaming to fight Dustin again, the guy who really dominated him in the first round, it's a bit worrisome. I don't want to see Conor on a 1-5 losing streak, which is quite possible if he wants to come back and fight Dustin again. I really think he should maybe look for some other fights, maybe the Diaz trilogy, or just something, where Conor can bring in them pay-per-view numbers, keep the UFC up there, because that's what he does and that's what he has been doing. He gives a huge entertainment factor to this business, but in terms of performing and martial arts, I'm not sure that we'll ever see the same Conor McGregor ever again after that.
No, plus I feel like Dustin Poirier might be in his prime right now. And
real.
Like how you mentioned that he completely dominated McGregor in the first round. That's why for the fourth, I would not be surprised if Poirier is incredibly juiced through the roof. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. But this upcoming weekend, new card, new weekend, new picks. So let's just get our main card breakdown started before we run out of any time. So for the first fight, we have featherweight Gabriel Benitez versus Billy Quarantillo. Via BetOnline, Quarantillo is plus 137 and Benitez is minus 157. Now, for everyone that didn't tune in last week, Billy was on our show, so we got a little insight of how his training camp went, but I want to hear your breakdowns and picks for this fight. I'll begin with Dave for your breakdown and pick.
Yeah, to begin with, from a betting perspective, you look at this entire card from the early prelims to the prelims to the main card. It's extremely difficult to find value. There's a lot of juice lines in positions where I don't necessarily think they deserve it. But right here with Billy Q and Benitez, I think we have a great opportunity to cash in on a dog, not because Billy was on the show last week, but because Billy was the rightful favourite, and the odds makers knew that, and that's why he opened as a minus 125 favourite. Now we're looking at him, and that price just keeps crawling, and I'm not seeing that many people getting on the action on Billy Q. We mentioned last week, former King of the Cage lightweight champion, is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, trains out of your beautiful home, Lee, in Tampa, at Gracie Tampa. He's been a professional for 8 years, competed on The Ultimate Fighter, one of the most memorable seasons, actually, with Team Faber and Team McGregor. One of the funniest seasons, that's for sure. And Billy told us last week, Gavin Tucker got his hands raised because of those takedowns, and that's what I believe. And for the past 6 months, he said he's been working on fixing those flaws. The good news is Gabriel Benitez doesn't own the wrestling credentials that Gavin Tucker does. And to be honest, I think Billy's takedown offense would be the stronger of the two this weekend. After The Ultimate Fighter, Billy he returned to the regionals and he dominated the majority of his opponents they put in front of him. 5 years later, Dana White Contender Series, came in as a huge underdog against Kamala Kirk, and he knocked him out in the third round. And, Kirk was a guy who probably was the stronger wrestler in that fight, and he did work some wrestling. But Billy, I tell you what, this guy does not stop. And this is one of his greatest attributes. It's his ability to fight at a high pace and keep that going through all 3 rounds. A ridiculous amount of volume that pairs up very well with a great gas tank, which is shown us in the majority of his fights. Now, yeah, he was on the show last week, but that is not going to dictate where our money should go. And as I mentioned, he's opened up as the bookmaker's favorite for a reason. And look, there aren't many guys that can handle his forward pressure. And that's why he's done so well in the UFC thus far, bar that one loss to Gavin Tucker. But in this particular matchup, I would like to see Billy utilize the grappling skills that he does have, because Benitez has some great Muay Thai fundamentals. And from a southpaw stance, he does have, a solid stand-up game. A wide variety of kicks, some beautiful straights. They could cause some problems if Billy is consistently walking forward with his head on the center line. Now, if I'm Billy, I'm going to be going for clinches. I'm going to be tiring Benitez down with going to clinch up, and I'm going to get close strikes. I'm avoid a stand-up war where you could find yourself taking some punishment from Benitez. Do not allow Benitez to get his kicking game in motion, suffocate the space, and if Billy does shoot, maybe want to avoid the guillotine, because we saw Benitez lock up Sam Sicilia. But with that said, I'm not too worried, because Billy is a black belt who's never been submitted for good reason, and he's damn good on the ground. Now, his takedown offense, I'd notice it as a step-in lead leg trip, and that's assisted a lot of Billy's takedowns. With Benitez in a southpaw stance, his favorite takedown won't be available, but I've no doubt that him and his team, they've taken notice of these little pointers, and, you know, he's going to have alternative methods to drag this one down to the ground. I think it's going to be a finish, because that's what Billy does a lot of the time, and Benitez loves to miss weight. He's a risk in that department alone, and now we're gifted with great plus money on Billy Q. It's a no-brainer for me. It's a dog or pass situation. So if you are betting this fight, I think half a unit on Billy at this dog price, yeah, it's a no-brainer.
I feel like he is the dog because people are basing his style based off of his last fight with Gavin Tucker. And yeah, he may have not been his sharpest, but he is a sharp fighter. But Matt, I want to hear what you have to say for this first fight with Benitez versus Quarantillo.
Well, Gabriel Benitez may not have the chops of a Gavin Tucker when it comes to the grappling, he submitted 10 of his opponents. So he may not be a world beater. And I'm not saying this because Billy replaced me last week, and he's so handsome, and he's a fighter, and I'm just some fat jabroni. I'm not saying that at all. I'm actually picking Billy Quarantillo to win this fight, but it's because he's the underdog in this situation. It's a dog or pass situation. I'm aligned with Dave on that. But I wouldn't fade Gabriel Benitez all that much, with the exception of the fact that he's never been able to put together a longer than 2-fight winning streak since joining the UFC. He actually had a 4-fight winning streak while in the UFC, but 2 of those fights came at the international level, and he was able to win his first 2 UFC fights. But for Quarantillo, I think that loss to Tucker is an aberration. It's not a part of the norm. He does have a win over Karma Worthy that's on the independent regional circuit, but this is a guy in a short amount of time has done a lot of damage inside the octagon, and someone who I think is going to get the win on Saturday.
All right, well, beautiful. If you guys do want to get in on this fight, again, via BetOnline, Quarantillo is plus 137 and Benitez is minus 157. But let's move on to the next fight. We have middleweight Rodolfo Vieira versus Dustin Stoltzfus. Did I say his name? Stoltzfus. I always mess up his last name. Via BetOnline, Vieira is minus 220 and Dustin is plus 185. Matt, I'll continue with you for your breakdown and pick for this next fight.
All right, well, both of these guys are coming in off of losses. Stoltzfus lost to Dauskas, which is probably the hardest fight to announce in all of mixed martial arts. And Vieira coming off a loss to Anthony Hernandez at 258. Vieira, as a pro, has never seen a scorecard, which is frightening. He has not also seen a third round since 2017. So we know he's going to come with the heat. And Stoltzfus has seen the distance 8 times in 15 fights. He had a 10-fight winning streak prior to that loss to Kyle Dauskas, with 8 of them being by stoppage. So if you're going to put anything on this fight, this is a stay-away fight for me, because these are 2 guys coming off of losses. I don't really trust that as someone who likes to put things on things. I would go with the under. I would go with the under in this fight. Take either fighter, but I'm looking at the under here, and I'm looking at a stoppage being the result here on Saturday night.
All right, interesting. How about you, Dave? Do you have a different breakdown than Matt, or do you agree with him?
No, I completely agree with the under. I mean, Rodolfo Vieira, after the Anthony Hernandez fight, where do we go from here? Plus 400 on Hernandez cashed because Vieira's grappling game plan didn't work. We watched, the BJJ champion lose to an Armin Guillotine, to a 27-year-old who had a 1-2 UFC record at the time. And that sums up MMA, really. You cannot completely trust any play on the board ever. Anything can happen. Now, is Vieira going to get tapped again? Probably not. But his, relentless pressure during round 1, could certainly cause issues for those later rounds. This guy puts everything into round 1, and he's got a very basic striking offense. He's going to mainly use feints that would just lead to a takedown. Nothing more, nothing less. His striking is nothing more than a disguise. But the problem is, if he does wrap up a leg, an arm, or a neck in the first 5 minutes, then that fight could very well end. And it probably will end if he gets hold of any of those limbs. We know exactly what Vieira is going to do. And in MMA, to me personally, that's never a good sign. Saying that, he's probably the most decorated jiu-jitsu practitioner currently fighting in the UFC. And Stoltzfus, you know, he isn't that bad off his back. And I've got a funny feeling he could make this bout more interesting than people anticipate. Now, Vieira to win is a stupid price. And even when you look at Vieira to win by submission, it's still a stupid price. Mm-hmm. The only viable bet for me is Vieira to win in round 1 at plus 175. That's probably the only bet I can see value on. It's showing poor odds on the submission win prop. And, you know, despite how strong those takedowns and ground control can be, Dustin has a wider jiu-jitsu game than Vieira's last opponent in Anthony Hernandez. He's never been finished in an MMA bout and clearly has the greater conditioning than the Brazilian. Both fighters are relatively new to the UFC. Stoltzfus made his debut against Carl Dacus. He's got a background in wrestling, and then he moved to karate and kickboxing, and he's been with the striking arts ever since. He's undoubtedly going to be the more talented striker. He's going to own the better conditioning. And as I said, the jiu-jitsu is there, especially off his back. He's had guillotines, rear naked, and he's even got a twister finish on his record. Now, for me, the fight's simple. Vieira's going to either win round 1 or lose the fight. I think we're going to see the exact same thing. He's incredibly large for that division, wide for that division, should say, and that's what's going to be affecting his cardio. He's just too muscular, but that muscle don't half pull through on a takedown, and that's what's scary when you're betting against Vieira. So, you know, if this fight, maybe it's worth a live bet. If this fight doesn't finish in the first round, the price that we're looking at now on Dustin is close to plus 200 at some books. That's going to shoot up if Vieira most likely will go all out in the first round. And you could be looking at plus 250, plus 300 as that second round's coming. So it might be worth just laying off the side altogether. And if you really have to bet on this fight, waiting for a live play. But even with that said, I've just got a funny feeling that we're going to see the same situation. I think Vieira's, you know, he's very one-dimensional, and as I mentioned, that's no good for MMA. You need to be good everywhere, because if that plan fails, what has he got to fall back on? He's got terrible cardio, and his striking is very undesirable. So, I mean, again, I think it's maybe a dog or pass situation if you're betting it pre-fight. But for me, the best move would probably be to wait for this one live and check how that first round goes. And then at least if Vieira does come out and get that submission, if you follow Matt's under, I think that's definitely going to cash, because Vieira's going to gas. I don't think Vieira's even got it in him to survive 15 minutes. I think he'll get punched out by Stoltzfus, or even again, you know, give up a submission like he did to Hernandez in them later rounds. But he's so dangerous in the first round that betting him against him is a bit risky. But yeah, I think it's a dog or pass situation again for me.
No, I'm with you guys on the dog in this one. I like the value on Stoltzfus, honestly. But again, via BetOnline, Vieira is minus 220 and Stoltzfus is plus 185. But let's move on to the next fight. We have lightweight Jeremy Stephens versus Mateusz Gamrot. Via BetOnline, Gamrot is minus 205 and Stephens is plus 175. Now, I am completely drawn in this fight, so I'm very curious to see who you guys are siding with. So, Matt, I'll begin with you this time for your breakdown and pick for this next fight.
Oh, all right. Just in a not so fun place to say that Jeremy Stephens lost 5 of his last fights, the other one being a no contest because Yair Rodriguez pulled the old Three Stooges on him. But you don't want to bet against Jeremy Stephens. But Gamrot is 1-1 in the UFC. He's a KSW mainstay. He's knocked out 6 opponents. But then Jeremy Stephens is tied for the most knockdowns in UFC history. He's knocked out 19 people. And then you look at the quality of opponent: Jose Aldo, Zabit, Yair, Calvin Kattar. those are the people that he's lost to. And then you've got Gamrot, who makes me want to say Kakarot because I'm a Dragon Ball Z fan. He beat Scott Holtzman and then lost a decision in his UFC debut. But then he won 17 fights before his debut. I am staying away from this, but I'm calling stoppage. Like, if you want to put a stoppage out there, that's the one you're going to go with. And if you want to put a sneaky bet on Stevens, go for it. Have fun. It's my birthday week. Do what you must.
I'm trying to find the props on there, but there are no props currently listed at Bet Online for this fight. So let's move on to Dave's breakdown and pick for this next fight for Stevens versus Gamrot. Dave.
Yeah. This, again, I mean, it is tough, but Gamrot 18-1 he is one of those guys, man. He attended a school that focused on freestyle wrestling when he was very young, and he's been competing in combat sports ever since. He's a Polish and European champion in wrestling, always competing in grappling competitions, whether he's got an MMA fight or not. He isn't just a takedown and do nothing type of guy. He chains his transitions together, and he really does own an elite level of skill in this area. His debut loss to Kutaladze, that holds zero shame for me. It was a closely fought split decision. But Gamrot was evidently outmatched on the feet against the Georgian. Reading the takedown game of Gamrot does seem a little troubling. He strikes from southpaw, and when he's wrestling, he'll return to an orthodox stance. That it still doesn't prevent a lot of his takedowns from landing because the pace is always high. But just having them simplistic reads could be a cause for concern. And another cause of concern is that he was dropped in that fight. He wasn't finished, but he was dropped. And that's when we move on to Jeremy Stephens, who's, he is riding the worst streak of his career, but he possesses that knockout threat no matter what. And, as mentioned, as Matt touched, losing to Calvin Keita, Yair Rodriguez, Zabit Magomedsharipov, Jose Aldo, he has literally fought some of the best fighters in the world. So how much can we take from that losing streak? I don't think we should be looking at that losing streak and thinking, oh, Jeremy Stephens sucks. But we could look at that losing streak and think, damn, he's took a beating. And, how much of his durability is going to be left. And Stephens, we know, he's all about them power shots. Good defense, chin down, and most importantly, he's got that fighter instinct. And the ground and pound that he unleashed on Josh Emmett, that was just an epitome of violence. Now, this matchup itself, it is a risky one. I am siding with Gamrot and his diverse wrestling skills. From almost all areas, he's going to be able to offer up some way of getting this fight grounded. And this fight is going to be a power puncher versus a power grappler. Stephens is going to struggle off his back, but he does have good takedown defense. His sprawling ability is good, but Gamrot is just not going to stop throwing them takedown attempts. Once Jeremy starts breathing heavy, becomes drowned in that grappling, he's not going to be letting off any offense of his own. And if he's not letting off offense, he's not scoring on the judges' scorecards. And this is how I see the hand of Gamrot being raised. Stephen is the greatest striker. I've no doubt about that. Most of Gamrot's striking is a setup for the takedowns. Not so much like Vieira, where he's completely effortless, but he did not like being hit by Kutaladze. That's one thing I noticed. A lot of feints, a lot of level changing straights. He's not looking to strike. He's consistently looking for takedowns, and you can't be mad at that because that's where he excels. Stephen will want them knees ready, which we've seen come into play before, and have uppercuts ready to counter those incoming takedowns, but that's easier said than done, because if them strikes miss, that momentum is probably going to give Gamrot an easier takedown. The low single leg is one of Gamrot's favourite takedowns, and if Stephens hasn't been drilling those for the past 6 weeks, he could be in some serious trouble. With all that said, I don't like the line. despite Gamrot's, impressive outing in the Holtzman fight last time out. I think Stevens is a better striker than Holtzman, and he owns better takedown defense than Holtzman. But as I said, if it does hit the ground, Stevens will be in trouble. And I haven't saw many Gamrot fights where he hasn't been able to land a takedown one way or another. But again, these odds, it's rough. And I think if Stevens wasn't on such a rough losing streak, I don't think we'd be seeing these odds, because Gamrot hasn't, Gamrot's not like 5-1 in the UFC. He's not been here that long. He hasn't proved his worth here yet. And I understand that the wrestling is elite, but that knockout threat of Jeremy Stevens and just seeing Gamrot get dropped by Kudaladze so easy, it does worry me. So when it comes to betting, I don't really want to pay $200 to win $1. I don't want to play $220 to win $100. It's not the sort of position I like to be in. And even when it comes to a parlay, I don't think I have enough confidence in him to put him on a parlay either. Although my pick will be Gamrot, I do think he's going to win. I think the grappling will dictate the fight. It's gonna have to be another stay away for me.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you with the stay away. But I guess when the props are posted, check out the props, do your studying, your research. The value should be there if you guys want to back Gamrot. But in via Bet Online, straight up, Gamrot is -205 and Stevens is +175. Now, before we get into the co-main and main event, real quick, guys, if you have any questions that you want to ask Dave or Matt, just throw them into the chat and we'll do our best at the end of the show to get those questions answered. Now, let's move on to the co-main event. We have a women's bantamweight, Marion Reneau versus Miesha Tate, and I am so excited for this fight. You have no idea. This is probably my most favorite fight on the card. But via Bet Online, Reneau is +124 and Tate is -144. Now, for everyone that does not know, Miesha Tate is coming out of retirement. She retired in 2016, and I see a lot of people in the chat saying, I'm not sure if Tate still has it, but I'll let you know right now, I'm liking her for this matchup, And plus, just to let you guys know, if you didn't know, Reneau is retiring after this fight. So this is a completely interesting matchup to me. But again, I want to hear what you guys have to say. Dave, I'll just continue with you for your breakdown and pick for the co-main.
Yeah, I'm excited for Miesha Tate's return as well. I've been watching her since she first started her career, but for betting purposes, this main card just gets worse. We've got a 44-year-old Marion Reneau coming off a 4-fight losing streak versus a 34-year-old Miesha Tate who hasn't fought since 2016 and is coming out of retirement. Realistically, you can make a case for both girls, but giving Tate a chance of winning this fight becomes difficult when we're looking at fighters from 2014, 15, 16. Tate has always been a good grappler. But she does not own the prettiest of striking offenses, and this is definitely an area where we should probably favor Reneau. So, and that's how we can make a case for both. Tate's losses have always come when her opponents can stuff the takedown and outstrike her, or they own a high enough level of BJJ to submit her. It's funny because Miesha Tate came in as a favorite against Amanda Nunes once upon a time, and not many people remember that or will have even bet on that, but it's crazy how things can change. Now, Tate will most likely pressure, push it up against the fence, and then look for a double or single leg, or maybe a outside leg trip if she's got Reneau up against the cage. But remember, nobody's going to be able to gauge an accurate read on Tate. We don't know what she's been doing. She's quit her 6-figure income at one to return to fighting to the UFC for less money. So I think we can give her motivation at least. Like, she must be motivated to fight, to give up that sort of salary whilst not getting punched in the face, to come back to the UFC and earn less. There's not a lot for us to break down in this fight. And to be honest, researching the fight's painful. Renew's going to want to stand up battle, and I don't think I've got the confidence in her takedown defense. A lot of Renew's losses have come through her inability to get off the cage or get to her feet after being taken down. So I think if Tate can lock in a single or double. That's always going to be a single or double leg takedown for Miesha Tate. I think it could be a boring fight where Reneau is going to accept position on the ground. Tate's going to be happy with it. Or maybe even a cheeky armbar or something towards the later rounds. But again, it's just a position where if I'm betting this fight, I may as well flip a coin because I really don't know. The dog money is not good enough on Reneau for me. I know some books, they have got it at plus 125, but majority of books have got this price from plus 110 to plus 115, and that's not big enough for me to be going for a dog who's coming off a 4-fight losing streak. Now, we do have to think about activity, and that, Reneau she's been fighting. She is 44 years old, but she has been fighting all these years whilst Miesha Tate has been talking. I don't know what Miesha Tate has been doing in her camps. I don't know how long she's been training for. I don't know what she's been focusing on in her camps. And I don't know her reasoning for doing this. So again, from a betting perspective, maybe this fight going the distance, but even then that's juiced. And as I say, Tate could get a cheeky submission at the end of round 2 or 3. I think that's a possibility. But there's not much for us to go off. So, I'm going to lean Miesha Tate based on her grappling credentials. She's always been a good wrestler. And Marion has shown a lot of weaknesses in them areas. So I think she can get held against a cage, get pummeled on. I do think she can give up some takedowns and just, surrender that position. So, yeah, for that reason, I'll pick Miesha Tate. But again, it's a sticky position. And I think, most of my betting interests probably would come on a couple of the preliminary fights more so than the main card.
Now, I included this fight in my top UFC picks. So if you guys want to hear my reasoning, check out my video when it is posted. But the main reason why I'm leaning towards Miesha Tate is because I was looking into her training camp, and she was basically saying how reinvigorated she feels, first of all, and she wants another shot at that title. Second of all, she said her training has been more intensive, more attention to details, more attention to her technique. So I feel like it's more in depth, her training this time than before, because she said before she was just guessing, whatever that means. But this time she seems really driven. She seems determined. So it's very, I don't know what the word is. I don't want to say motivating, but it's positive. That's what I liked about it. But there's also more reasonings to it. So again, check out my top UFC picks video for that. But Matt, I would love to hear your breakdown and pick for this co-main event.
All right. This is a dumb idea. Because I'm gonna talk to you right now, everybody. Miesha Tate is 34 years old. She has not fought since 2016, and she said against Rocky Pennington, who also beat Marion Reneau, by the way, I don't have it anymore. The sport has passed me by. What has happened in the last 5 years? Does working for one championship suck that much that you got to jump back in the fighting? Or is there an ulterior motive here? Because Amanda Nunes, as we all know, beat Miesha Tate. Amanda Nunes needs opponents. And when Dave is talking about taking half the money, it gets the old brain box working because, as we all know, Dana White's an upstanding individual. And, Marion Reneau, it's her last fight. So I'm not going to say there's hijinks and tomfoolery. I'm just expecting this fight to be a politer affair than you probably assume. So take Miesha Tate and the decision, because they need somebody to sell a fight against Amanda Nunes in that weight class. Because everybody right now that could fight Amanda Nunes has pretty much fought Amanda Nunes. And they've all jobbed pretty hard. And Ronda ain't coming back. She's having a kid. She's got a farm. Who can we get? Oh, Miesha Tate's just putting around Asia. What's she up to? Throw a Brinks truck at her and let's see what happens. So if you're looking for something, that's what I would go with. I'm going with Miesha by decision.
All right, beautiful. Well, if you guys do want to get in on this fight via BetOnline, Marion Reneau is plus 124, Miesha Tate is minus 144. But let's move on to the main event. We have lightweight Islam Makhachev versus Thiago Moises. Via BetOnline, Makhachev is minus 700 and Moises is plus 450. Matt, I'll continue with you for your breakdown and pick for the main event.
People keep testing me. They keep testing me. Thiago Moises, 3 straight wins, 2 by decision, 1 by submission. His last win was over Anthony Hernandez in February. If you think that Islam Makhachev, after beating Chris Wade, Nick Lenz, Gleason Tebow, Kajan Johnson, Amon Tarsukian, Davi Ramos, and Drew Dober, his last opponent, he tapped them out at UFC 259. If you think that he's going to put himself in a situation to where he's not going to beat Thiago Moises, who's lost by decision, this is a 5-round fight. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lee and Dave, but this is the first time Moises has been in a 5-rounder.
Yep.
He's 6-4 when you go to 3 rounds. Islam Makhachev is a boa constrictor disguised as a human being and will do everything inside, my favorite phrase in mixed martial arts, the baby cage. He is going to cut off the distance, and he is going to make it a very long and very painful night for Thiago Moises. If you're looking for something to put into a prop, I would take Makhachev by submission because, he's submitted 6. So Moises is comfortable going to the ground. He's pulled off 6 submissions in his career. He's only knocked out 3 people. Same thing with Makhachev. They both got 3 knockouts on their record. But this fight goes to the ground. It's going to be based on the wrestling, based on the submission work, based on the positioning. And Makhachev has so much momentum, and that 5-rounder is going to be a true test for Moises. Because he may not be as fresh as a daisy, and he's 6-4 when it goes to decision. That's close enough to 50-50 for me to make that a toss-up. Every sign points towards Makhachev. I'm going with him by decision, but a sneaky prop might be putting him up by submission.
All right, so real quick, the props at BetOnline. Makhachev by points is minus 120, but by submission is plus 450. So the value's there if you do think he's going to get it inside the distance. But Dave, I would love to hear your breakdown and pick now for the main event.
Yeah, it's another headache for me, really. This should be a top 10 fight for Islam, and I'm quite pissed off about it. I can't lie. I want to see him tested. He's earned it. Instead, he's taken a fight against Moises, the only person who's got the nuts to take him on, and that's the straight truth. Now, the Hernandez fight, counter straight rights, that's all good until you're fighting Makhachev, who's going to slam you to the ground after raising those hands. We know what Islam is about. The second coming of Khabib, blah, blah. I think just let the man be himself. He's not Khabib. Do you know why he's not Khabib? Because his striking defense relies a lot of leaning back. He's been knocked out. I do think he can be knocked out again if he hasn't completely fine-tuned everything. This is leaning back stuff. He's gonna catch himself a high kick one day, and his jaw might end up in the first row of the arena if he doesn't get his hands up. Now, saying that, he is at American Kickboxing Academy. He does have the coaching of Khabib, and there is nobody in that division with a greater wrestling offense anymore. Moises will get taken down. The interesting thing is Moises, he fights good off his back. Islam isn't going to be landing consistent ground and pound. It's not going to be a situation that we've seen him in before where he's been able to go wild on the ground, because Moises will be attacking and defending at the same time with submission attempts. Islam's best chance, I think, get into half guard, limit Moises' submission attempts, and in that position, he will be able to land as much as he wants to. We've got one of the best wrestlers, if not the best wrestler in the lightweight division in Islam versus Moises, who owns one of the best defensive submission games in the division. And on the feet, that's a different story. What I'm trying to think now, there was a Makhachev fight, and he decided, the Davi Ramos fight, he decided he didn't want to wrestle at all. Now, that's okay. You know, he didn't lose the fight. He won the fight with his striking. But if he thinks, you know, if he's going to have that confidence and completely ignore what he's best at, that could be a concern, because I think when it comes to the striking, Moises is the better striker. I think the striking favors Moises. We should know that Moises' striking is quite heavy. He does load up a lot, and that does leave openings for takedowns. So in saying he's the best striker, he is open a lot. And a guy like Makhachev is got to pounce on them situations. So I don't think I'm going to worry that, you know, he's going to come out and attempt to strike with Moises too much. With the small nitpicking I can do against Makhachev, there's no denying there's a great chance he'll be champion one day. Reaching the title fight will probably be one of his biggest problems, because nobody wants to fight him. I think the odds are correct, but having watched Islam get caught before, he could, you know, find himself in a submission hold he's not expecting, which is, you know, a reason why I don't think it's a viable play at this price. Fight going the distance, however, that's probably something that I'm interested in. Matt mentioned that Moises has never done 5 rounds, and neither has Makhachev. Now, I do have more confidence in Makhachev's cardio, because when you're running in the in the Dagestani mountains, then I'm sure your cardio is going to be top notch. But at the same time, we haven't seen it yet, so it's, you know, it's a guessing game. I don't know how either man are going to do in round 4 or 5. But if you've been getting heavily grappled by Makhachev for 15 minutes, I could see both men being tired in round 4 and 5, which reduces the chance of a finish taking place, which is why I think that over is where you can find some value. I've written a few articles this week. I think I gave the over 3.5 rounds, because I think the bookmakers are onto it too, and it is slightly juiced. The toughness and durability of both men is very evident. So despite me thinking Islam is going to dominate this fight, I'm not sure if he will get the finish. He has struggled to get the finish in the past. He does have quite a few decision victories. Aaron Teskurian, Davi Ramos spring to mind. So yeah, I think it's got to be maybe an over for me, over 3.5. I'm not sure if I want to tread into the 4.5, 5.5, because you just never know how tired somebody is going to get. And yeah, again, as with the majority of this card, I have been sat here sweating over the value, looking for positions to make money on this card, because last week was such a good one. And this is what can get you sometimes in betting on MMA. You have a great week and you got them profits, and you're rubbing your hands together waiting for next week to come along, and then a card like this pounces and you're just hunting, and sometimes you'll force plays, but it's just not there. I landed 3 parlays this week. I can barely create 1 parlay this week. So it just goes to show how different a week can be. This matchmaking for me this week is very good, and a lot of the matchups that they're hard to predict or even find any value. So yeah, the pick will be Islam, obviously, but I think it could be Islam by decision. So from a betting perspective, I think it's the over.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned like last week being a good card and this week being not as much, because you can't make a parlay for this one. That means bankroll management. Don't just place a bet because you want to place a bet. Do your research, do your homework. If you are confident, then place your bet. If you're seeing any doubt, whenever I doubt something, I'm just like, okay, just don't even deal with it, because you're going to enter this whole pool of mess and you don't want to do that. But there we have it. So again, if you guys want to get in on the main event, straight up Makhachev is -700 and Moises is +450. Again, check out the MMA props at BetOnline. There's a lot of value there for you guys. Now let's jump into our prelims. Is there a top prelim that you guys are looking out for? Matt, I'll start with you this time for your top prelim pick.
Well, as Dave said, it's easier to put money on the prelims than it is the main card for this one. But taking a look at the prelims for this, I like Daniel Rodriguez. I think Daniel Rodriguez is a top-notch fighter. I don't know why. I guess because he's going up against the name of Preston Parsons. Even though they have a 9-2 record, it does sound like they are already waiting in the octagon for Rodriguez to come in. I think that obviously is the prelim to watch. The women's strawweight could be an interesting one. You've got a 9-1-1 fighter going up against a 10-1 fighter. No big boy fights on the card except the opening prelim, Alan Badeau versus Rodrigo Nascimento Ferreira. Both of those guys 8-2 and 8-1. And let's take a look at the weights here, both in the 240 to 245 range. So someone's going to get hurt. So if you're looking for a fun fight where two fat dudes are going to beat each other about the face, neck, and chest, take a look at the opening fight of that one. Just going off of this here, I'm going to go with Ferreira because he's heavier and he's got the longer reach. So he's going to be throwing a lot of piñatas. But yeah, Daniel Rodriguez, he might be my lock of the night too, just because he's Daniel Rodriguez and he's a talented fighter, and I can see him doing a lot of damage on Saturday night.
Beautiful. Well, the event online, Nascimento is -345, so there's that. And then if I can't find Rodriguez, Daniel Rodriguez is -330, and Preston Parsons is +270. Well, how about you, Dave? What is your top prelim pick for this weekend?
Yeah, spoiler alert. Matt's nailed it. I think the opening fight, them big boys, the fight not to go the distance made one of two of this week's parlays. And then D-Rod, Daniel Rodriguez, he made it onto the other parlay. So there's a little spoiler. Two of my legs on two separate parlays that I will be going with. And same as Matt, it's Rodriguez, jab, speed, low kicks, hawks, D-Rod. He is favored in this bout because on the feet, the advantage is all with Rodriguez. Beautiful setups, reads his opponents nicely, perfect fundamentals in boxing, which we like to see. And look, I'm going to be honest, 14-2, it should not be 14-2. Watch Daniel Rodriguez fights. It should be 16-0. These judges, they really do suck. And D-Rod's been robbed. He's been robbed. Them boxing fundamentals, there's no random striking from him. It's all a setup to the head, to the body. He's just levels above Parsons in this area. I'm watching Parsons regional fights, and it's just reckless abandonment from him. It's just, he's very green. We should know he has won every single one of his fights. All of his wins, all 9 wins, have been via submission. But he's going to have to pull guard and, submit D-Rod off his back. Any chance of doing that. D-Rod's got some great wrestling in him as well. And I just don't envision a takedown submission scenario for Parsons in his UFC debut. Making your debut is tough enough, but against a guy like Rodriguez, who's already 4-1 in the UFC, should be 5-0 in the UFC with 2 finishes, that's a rough outing, in my opinion. Obviously, the line's getting juiced. It's probably going to go even higher the more people realize how damn good Rodriguez is. I think he's one of the most underrated fighters in the UFC. We've broke him down before on the show. I can't praise him enough. So with that juice, you know me, I'm not going to be paying up stupid prices. So I think Rodriguez is a perfect parlay addition for anybody looking to boost their value this week.
So beautiful. So again, Rodriguez is -330 if you guys do want to add him into that parlay. But let's move on to our lock on the card segment. Now, just looking at this card and just how all the matchups are, I'm not going to point you in the wrong direction. I don't have a lock on this card. This card is so weird. So since I'm going to assume you guys probably don't have a lock, but if you do, let me know what your lock is. But if not, then what fight are you most confident about? What pick are you most?
I think we just said it. Yeah, I think we just said it. D-Rod. I think it's got to be D-Rod if there's a lock. I really do. Preston Parsons making his UFC debut against a guy with some incredible boxing. I think he's going to beat the crap out of him. I think he's going to punch him. I think he's going to finish him. I don't see Preston Parsons surviving in there with D-Rod. If D-Rod loses, it's going to be some cheeky submission that we didn't expect. But as I said, just getting D-Rod down is going to be hard enough. You got to come into that boxing range to get him down, and you're going to have to eat some nasty hooks or straights on your way in. So for me, the lock has got to be D-Rod, because when you look at this card, it is a rough one. It is quite a rough one. And secondly, I think if I was forced, if I had to take D-Rod away, I mean, maybe Francisco Figueiredo, because his opponent in Malcolm Gordon, he just really hasn't impressed me all that much. And again, it's the lines that are stopping me this week. Although I like Figueiredo, not many fighters are deserving of these odds. So
they're also juiced.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, D-Rod's the lock for me.
Okay, I've mentioned D-Rod's odds like several times. But Figueiredo's odds are -310. Like how we said before, I would say the majority of everyone on this card is incredibly juiced. Like Amanda Lemos versus Ruiz. Lemos is -550. So we have a bunch of juiced fighters on this card. But how about you, Matt? What is your potential lock on this card?
Yeah, it's Daniel Rodriguez. I think that Miesha Tate is a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, unless something freaky happens. But I'm not even looking at that fight. It's Daniel Rodriguez is the closest thing to a lock on this card for me. Just too much skill, as Dave said. He should be 16-0. I don't see this going to the scorecards. It's going to be an easy night for Daniel Rodriguez. Beautiful.
But let's just jump into our chat questions now before we end the show. And I saw a couple good ones. For BC_Dave, shout out to BC_Dave because you're always here. He said, will the main event go 5 rounds, meaning to a decision? I remember, Dave, you said you liked 3, but could go. But if you want to reiterate your response to that question, Dave.
Yeah, I think it's, again, as I touched on, it's not knowing how these guys are going to fare into these championship rounds. Mm-hmm. And between the two, I'll probably have to favor Makhachev having the greater cardio, meaning that we could see, a late sloppy submission where Moises is really tired or worn out from the grappling that Makhachev is going to put on him. But I've already said it. I like this fight to go the distance. But just this card, I'm truly just trying to find value, and it's just extremely hard. And betting Makhachev at -700, it doesn't make much sense for anything. I'm going to put it in a parlay and get what? What am I getting from that? I'm not really getting much anyway. So
to pair it up,
yeah, there is better value, and to try pair up a -700 with something, it just doesn't make sense. And for me, when it comes to a parlay, it's 2-leg. You'll probably see me do a 3-leg parlay once or twice a year, because I'm looking for an implied probability that's gonna give me a good chance of winning. I'm not looking at anything below 45%. And to be fair, I'm rarely looking at anything below 50% because I want a 50-50 chance of my bet coming in, and that's why I've been so profitable for so many years.
You crushed it last week, so honestly, good job, Dave.
Thank
You're
you.
really good. But one more question before we end the show. Gabriel Katz, who is another person that always joins, he said, same question for Matt and Dave, who's the best ref? That's just a very generic question. And first person that comes to me, well, I know you didn't ask me, but I like Jason Herzog. But I want to hear who you guys like.
Obviously, it's Herb Dean for that.
Oh my God!
Great stoppage that he pulled off last week. He lets a man take 220 significant strikes and then stops it in the last 30 seconds. It's got to be Herb Dean. There's no better ref out there.
Hold on, that's another question. Do you think Herb should have stopped that fight, or do you think he should have finished the 30 seconds of that fight? Because
the fight should end
is
in the
getting
middle
too
of
big.
a
It's tough.
second.
Look, it is tough.
It's very
I'll
tough.
make a joke. I'll make a joke, right? But in all seriousness, if you can see that a fighter is really getting, maybe just Herb wasn't aware because Moutinho was coming forward so much in that fight for the first 2 rounds. Yeah, he was getting cracked, but you know it's that. And then Herb could have just been looking at the wouts on his face by the end of that round and just thinking, I don't want this kid, to take any more punishment. It's hard for referees. It's really hard. Imagine being stood between 2 guys that are trying to take each other's head off, man. Like the pressure, the pressure's on. But I've always liked Matt Goddard. I think Matt Goddard's a good referee. But in terms of like referee with like good refereeing, I don't think there aren't many really, because they all make mistakes because we're human and human error exists. So they take a lot of slack. But when it comes to the judges, that's a whole different story. These judges, that they really do need sorting out.
Yeah. I mean, everyone hates on Herb Dean, though. I feel so bad. But Matt, just real quick, do you have a favorite ref?
Mike Beltran for mustache reasons,
Yes.
but I'm also a fan of Keith Peterson. I'm a big fan of a lot of the current crop of referees. Mario Yamasaki will never be replaced in my heart, but I'm kidding. He was the shits. But there's a lot of great talented referees now. I like Mark Goddard a lot as well. Herb Dean comes and goes, like we were talking about with that fight. It's really hard to sustain you being the elite official when you just allow a man, as I said at the top of the show, to get beaten into beautiful Squidward face live on pay-per-view. What's the matter with you?
I feel like there's a lot of pressure, but anyway, that's everything that we have for our entire main card breakdown, our top prelim picks, and our potential lock on the card. If you guys have any questions that we have not answered, you can either hit us up on Twitter or just write us your questions down below in the comments. If you aren't following the guys on Twitter, definitely give them a follow. You can follow Dave at @DManion_, and you can follow Matt at MRyan Consulting. And then while you're at it, just give SBR a follow at SBR Sports Picks. If you want to find more breakdowns and picks regarding anything UFC related, meaning you can find my articles, you can find Dave's articles, and also Ed Solano's articles, just go to sbrpicks.com/UFC. Now, I wish you all the best of luck. I'll see you next time.